The war has been won, but the cost to Kuwaitis in human terms has been enormous. We'll go live to Forrest Sawyer reporting from Kuwait City, and we'll be joined by a Kuwaiti doctor who bears grim first-hand testimony to some of the accounts of Iraqi brutality. Also, we'll look at other aspects of war damage that'll scar the region long beyond the end of the fighting. Live from the Gulf tonight.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Saudi Arabia with the latest on the Gulf War, Ted Koppel.
It will take far longer to secure the peace here in the Gulf than it took to win the war. Kuwait is already requesting the reassurance that coalition troops or a UN peacekeeping force will remain as a buffer between their country and Iraq for an extended period. The Pentagon today cautioned the families of U.S. troops in the region that withdrawing forces from the Gulf is likely to take longer than the 5 months it took to get them and their equipment into the region. But the process has begun. President Bush announced today that Iraq has already agreed to designate some of its military commanders to meet with top U.S. military officials in order to formalize the ceasefire. And a few hours from now, the first Kuwaiti government officials are scheduled to return to their country to begin surveying the damage of war and what it will take to repair that damage. Joining us live once again from Kuwait City is Nightline correspondent Forrest Sawyer. Forrest, I take it that peace is sort of coming in waves into Kuwait City. We see the reaction of the people. How is the country beginning to repair itself?
Well, you and I talked when they were celebrating, Ted, and I think now that the shock of this rapid end to the war has worn off, they are realizing just how much rebuilding has to be done here. There is no power throughout the city, just what generators can turn out. Water is a severe problem, no telephone service. The infrastructure has just been destroyed. And as nearly as I can tell, dealing with members people who have been members of the resistance and going about the city, there is no real security either. There are simply some young men who have taken up arms and are manning different checkpoints. The troops have not moved in to operate as police. It is a kind of empty city in terms of the government that they need. And you know, too, that the government has not yet moved in. The health minister came in last night. So far, that's the only thing that we've had. And there is no real plan to go about rebuilding it that's been announced as yet. And that's a tremendous frustration to the people here who have been living through all this.
Bring us up to date, Forrest, on what has happened since you and I spoke last night. What are some of the scenes that you've seen and some of the stories that you've heard over the last 24 hours?
Well, I went out with a man who was one of the key organizers here, and we have spoken with him, as you know. He is Sheikh Ali Salem al-Sabah. And I went all over as he met with people, tried to bring some organization. I saw some communications systems that they have here. They're basically ham radios and satellite telephones. They try to talk to one another to get things steamed back up again. And I heard a lot of frustration in his voice as he was talking about some of the difficulties that they have in beginning the organization, in making things work. You know, too, that the city has been burned so badly by the Iraqi troops here. Buildings completely torched. The Parliament building has been terribly damaged. They're trying to find a place where government offices can at least start to operate. The hotel we're in has really no water and has no electricity, and it's like that throughout the city. That's the sense I've gotten. And as I drive around, as I told you, there isn't any real security. And people are now beginning to worry about that, particularly because there are still Iraqis who are holed up here. A lot of them are still giving themselves up. They've been taken to the police stations, and there's no place to take them. There are about 3,000 that I know of that have not been picked up and carried out, and the Kuwaitis are having to feed them, to take care of them, and they don't really have the sufficient supplies to do that.
One of the Kuwaiti resistance members spoke to us by telephone last September 7th on Nightline. It was a 31-year-old woman, and she was risking her life so that the world would know what the Iraqis were doing to her country.
Oh, I just want you to know that they are ripping everything apart in Kuwait, taking it to Baghdad. We don't have any guns. We don't have any arms. A lot of them, they have been killed, and the ones that they captured, they just, they've been taking them, torturing them, and they have been killing them.
We now have reason to believe that Kuwaiti resistance member was herself captured, tortured, and then killed by the Iraqis. Joining us live from Kuwait City is a Kuwaiti doctor. He has asked that his identity remain a secret. He was a member of the resistance who can shed some light on the circumstances of her death. Doctor, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can do. Go ahead then.
What can you tell me about that woman? What did happen to her and when?
This is the voice of the woman you've been talking about. She worked from day one in Kuwait. She was doing all the kinds of work in Kuwait was being done by the resistance, by the government, taking care of people, helping people with food, money, guns for the resistance, moving around, doing special IDs for the policemen in Kuwait because they couldn't move around. And they took her almost 2.5 months ago because they, in a way, I don't know how they knew it, but they knew that her name. And they took her for almost a month in their jails, and they tortured her and they threw her in front of her uncle's house. The scene was terrible. Actually, her scene was the worst I've seen all through the last 6.5 months. If you want a description, I could describe it to you, but she had 3 bullets in the chest, and her head was beaten by an axe and cut into 2 halves, or into, let's say, 3 halves, you can say. It was a terrible scene.
If you don't want to answer this, you don't have to, obviously, but why, now that Kuwait City is free again, do you not want us to reveal your identity?
Actually, for some security reasons. I don't think security is still 100% complete in Kuwait. So, and there are still some Iraqi members, especially of their secret police, probably in Kuwait. So I'd like to keep my ID secret till things are clear up.
You are still a working doctor?
Yes, I'm still working as a working doctor. I've been working since the 1st of August even.
I'll tell you what, doctor, if you'd be good enough to stand by, we still want to talk to you a little bit more, but we're going to take a short break and then we'll talk with the Kuwaiti doctor and once again with Faraz Soya when we come back. And then a little bit later in our broadcast, we'll look at the environmental costs and the political consequences of the Gulf War when we go to Amman and Moscow. So please stay with us. Joining us again live from Kuwait City is ABC's Faraz Soya, along with a member of the Kuwaiti resistance. I would like to talk first of all, however, to Faraz. I gather that you and the doctor went through some of the city morgues today, and you have some video of that. Can you hear me now, Faraz?
Ted, actually, I think we have a little technical problem. I'm hearing the control room. I think we have a switch that's thrown open in the control. So if we could take care of that, I'll be able to hear. There we are.
I'll tell you what, let's see if you can hear me. If not, we'll just play it by ear and let the control room cue you. Can you hear me now?
We've taken care of it, Ted.
I was just saying that you and the doctor with you went to some of the city morgues today to examine some of the evidence, the terribly grim evidence of what happened to some of the resistance fighters who were captured by the Iraqis. And I would like you, if you would, to tell us what it is that we're looking at, Faraz, and I should warn our audience at home, much of this is obviously very grim material.
Well, I believe that you're probably looking at the video that we took inside the morgue. We went down to visit it. They're trying to compile evidence, Ted, of the atrocities so that in the future people will know what has happened, and if there is a legal case, if there do happen to be war crimes, they will be able to present this hard evidence. These are torture victims that were beaten about the body, as the doctor will tell you, about the head, and usually killed with a bullet wound. And the doctor with whom I am standing is one of a very small group in this particular hospital who hid a camera inside the hospital and then risked his life by going down to the morgue and taking pictures, which you'll be able to see in just a moment, of these torture victims, so that there would be a record of their lives and their deaths, and we would be able to tell the world about it.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we, at the same time that we're looking at the photographs, ask the doctor to tell us what it was that he saw and what kind of treatment he had to administer to people. In other words, what kinds of injuries, what kinds of wounds did these people have after they were brought to the hospital from after interrogation by the Iraqi authorities?
Actually, the pattern that was done is that they start torture people by simply beating them. So the beating marks are full on their bodies. Then they start to extract their nail fingers. They have cigarette burns, and then they start to more severe status where they start to cut arms or legs or ears. In some cases they extract the eyes, and the worst was like in the case of the girl we spoke about, they put an axe on the head and they cut it into two halves. And in few cases they also cut the genital areas. I'm aware of 2 cases in such a situation. They even don't bring them to the hospital. They take them and throw them immediately in front of their families' houses, in front of their mothers.
Doctor, the evidence that we're seeing right now, and of course what you were telling us is almost grotesque beyond words, but I wonder if you can also give us a sense of what the scope was in terms of numbers of people. We have heard such vastly differing numbers from your experience, from your own personal experience, and from what you have heard from others who actually saw this kind of evidence. Do you have any sense of how many people were held and treated like this?
Actually, I would say the numbers of executed people, tortured and then executed, wouldn't be more than hundreds. It's only hundreds. But those who were captured and tortured and then sent out or thrown to their families again, that would be more than thousands. That's definite.
Now, this is, I don't know whether you can even begin to answer this question, but in the light of what we have just seen and what you have been telling us, I find it difficult to believe that the Iraqis who are now being held are not the objects of some kind of revenge. What is the attitude of the people who are now holding, and I'm speaking now of the Kuwaitis who are now holding Iraqi prisoners of war?
I would be more specific about the feeling of Kuwaitis, actually. I can speak to you, for example, about the treatment we are giving to the POWs in the hospital, let's say, or we call them patients, actually. They are getting the maximum, best treatment we have. We can give it to, even to Kuwaitis or others. They are getting 3 meals, they are getting water, and they took showers even. At the time, you reporters don't have a shower even. The others, POWs in the streets, all are being gathered as prisoners. I'm not aware of a single case brought tortured yet to the hospital in the past 3 or 4 days from the Iraqis. So yet I haven't seen. Yeah.
Let me interrupt you just for 1 second, because if the audience at home is seeing breakup on the picture from Kuwait City, I want you to understand the power, of course, is being generated by a portable generator there, and we are having some difficulties. It's not a problem that you're experiencing at home. It's just a problem in the signal from Kuwait City. Doctor, let me now move on to ask you about some of those who collaborated with the Iraqis. To what degree did either Kuwaitis or some of the other nationalities who were residents in Kuwait during the war, to what degree did they collaborate with the Iraqi authorities?
There were very few people who collaborated with the Iraqis, but there were Kuwaitis, there were non-Kuwaitis. I wouldn't specify.
What about the health conditions and what is likely to happen because you don't have running water, because you don't have electricity? What do you estimate is going to be the immediate danger in terms of the population in Kuwait City and throughout the rest of Kuwait, for that matter?
For the population of Kuwait present at the time being in Kuwait, and at this point of time, actually, will run into some problems with water because of some sterilization and steam and for operation. But I think we have this problem only for the last couple of days only. But they are bringing water tanks and everything. I think we'll have no problem with that in the coming 24 or 48 hours to survive at least in a good shape. I wouldn't say normally, but in a good shape, an acceptable health and good shape.
All right, Doctor, thank you very much for joining us. Farah Sawyer, again, thank you for being with us this morning. Tonight, back in the States, we will look, when we come back, at the battlefield as hostilities came to an end today. All of that in a moment. The mechanics of ending a war take a little time. The ceasefire is in place and senior Allied officers will meet, as I mentioned earlier, with their Iraqi counterparts to go over the fine print. But out in the desert, ABC's John Lawrence reports on the human reaction as the soldiers who fought the war learned that their job would soon be over.
On the fourth and final day of the land battle, American soldiers from the 3rd Armored Division moved across the Iraqi desert, attacking a unit of the Republican Guards. It was no contest. Tactical air support allowed the Americans to stand off, out of range of the Iraqi tank guns, and pound them into submission. It is one of the reasons for the low number of casualties on the Allied side of the war. Some of the American soldiers in the war say they expected the Iraqis to put up a tougher fight. Those who did not run away were killed or captured. One GI said the 4-day battle against the Iraqis was less difficult than some of the peacetime training exercises they'd been through. Still, the ceasefire was welcomed. This morning, some of the troops from 3rd Brigade got the good news from ABC News correspondent Jim Wooten.
2 hours, this thing is over. In 2 hours, it's over. Who said that? President Bush. It's on the radio? What is it? No, man, in 2 hours, it's over. In 2 hours, it's over. Yeah! Whoa! That's what I'm talking about. With us. I don't know if you can say that. That's all right. Okay. Do you have what's going on? It's suspend military operations at 8 o'clock. What happened to the Republican Guard, if you know anything? I think you guys pretty well did the Republican Guard in yesterday. And they're through. They're through. That's all right. That's all right.
Hey, Mom, get the beer ready, because I'm coming home.
Hey, did you know, in about 2 hours, this thing is over. All over.
Don't tell me news that is not true.
No, it's true.
So I'm coming. 2 hours, it's over. Come here, this is ABC over here.
Come here, you talk to us.
Well, that's great, if it's true. I don't want to get my hopes up. I've been dreaming too long. Oh, God.
After 4 days of fighting, there was time today to clean up, but not to relax with Saddam Hussein still in power.
Ready to go home?
We are you?
Oh yeah, ready to go home.
Put that away?
Say again?
Put the ammunition away?
And we ain't gonna put it away, we're gonna just have it on ready if we need it, just in case.
On standby.
You never know what might come up.
Sounds like you don't trust him.
No, he ain't the most trustworthy guy in the world right now. Not with America anyway.
He's not in my book, he ain't.
They get a little mad, but we did what we had to do, did what we were told to do. You know, and if it come down to it, we'll go back out and do it again.
If you really want my opinion, I think we should totally eliminate his army. I mean, totally eliminate him. Because if he continues to have an army, then he continues to be a threat somewhere. And I don't want my children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren coming back to this region and fighting against Iraq again. That's how I feel.
Y'all always told me he had bad feet, look at him.
Dogs here.
How y'all doing?
Fine, how about yourself?
Isn't peace wonderful?
This is great.
Too bad it couldn't have come sooner.
We'll have to walk those feet tomorrow.
Oh, really? They hurt. Dr. Scholes, square them away. Really? Company! Oh! Tans, hunt!
And with the ceasefire, it was back to the more regular routine of Army life. But emotions were closer to the surface.
You are some of the finest soldiers I've ever served with in 17 years in the Army. You're all a great bunch of gentlemen, and I'm very happy that we... that we've come through. You think I'm kidding because of the way I treat you, I know, but I'm serious that we came through this thing all right, and I want to take every one of you home, and we only lost one soldier yesterday.
One of the differences between here and Vietnam is the unit cohesiveness, that you do have a unit here rather than volunteers, yes, but you live together, kids go to school together, etc. Does that really make a difference in combat?
Yeah, there's another side to this war that you don't see. It's going on back where we live in Germany. Makes a hell of a lot of difference. The other part of it is we have been together. This is a mature brigade. We've been together as a brigade pretty much consistently since I took command summer before last, about 16, 17 months ago. The same key people.
With the end of the war and the beginning of the peace, American and Allied troops can now start giving the desert back to those who live here and think about going home themselves. John Lawrence for Nightline, Tehran.
It has been one of the bizarre aspects of this war that even as we have been covering it from the coalition side, so too we have been able on an almost nightly basis to be in touch with ABC correspondent Bill Blakemore in the enemy's capital, in Baghdad. Bill Blakemore joins us again live from there tonight. And Bill, I guess I have to begin as I do every evening with you by asking you quite simply, what have you been able to hear, what have you been able to learn in Baghdad, because obviously it is very limited.
Well, actually, we've had remarkable access to wander around the capital throughout the last 3 weeks. And yesterday for us, the first day of the ceasefire, we wandered through a number of neighborhoods and found an enormous sense of relief in everybody we talked to. However, there had not yet been any kind of reports, even on Voice of America or BBC, about what Iraqi casualties might be. I suspect that with the day that's beginning here now, the second day of the ceasefire, those reports which we've begun to hear on the BBC this morning will begin to filter through the population here, and people will be doing more reassessing of just how serious Iraqi casualties might be.
Perhaps more importantly, Bill, than reports of casualties, is whether indeed there has been any public concession by the Iraqi authorities that this is a war that they have lost. Because I must tell you, we're beginning to hear reports coming out of Iraq that there's still sort of belligerent chest-beating kind of talk coming out of there. Which are you hearing?
Oh, well, we have the few official announcements which have been made have in no sense talked about being defeated. They've been talking about the opposite. They say that Iraq was victorious, that in fact on the last day of battle, according to one of the official announcements yesterday, Iraq had given the Allies such a beating that had caused them to decide they should stop fighting. In fact, this is a line that's not exactly new, because they've been saying it from the beginning of the war, and many Iraqis we've talked to as well said it was one country holding out against 28. We knew that ultimately militarily it wouldn't be viable, but it was heroic for that reason to make a point. That's in general what we're hearing, certainly from the official line and from some of the Iraqis we've talked to.
But it would be accurate to say that by no stretch of the imagination is there a feeling that there was anything approaching an unconditional surrender.
That's right. I mean, well, what they're saying is they did not surrender because Saddam Hussein had started talking about offering to pull out 10 days ago. The logic in terms of public relations, as it was presented here, was we've offered to pull out, it was rejected by America, but now we're going to do it anyway. However, people here listen to the radio broadcasts from many countries. There are no illusions here about what the general military situation was, and people know that they now have a period of reassessment. In fact, walking around some of the neighborhoods yesterday, it was not possible to tell what the real political feelings of some of the older people, some of the adults might be. That's something for the coming days, I suspect, as more realities begin to sink in.
Bill, one last question, and that is, it has been a fact of life for you and all the others reporting from Iraq that whenever you report live, there has been an official, usually from the Ministry of Information there. Is that still the case?
Yes, it is. Indeed, it is.
And to what degree has there ever been any kind of interference, or perhaps after the case a suggestion that they wished you'd said something a little bit different? And again, I realize even by putting that question to you right now, it may be difficult for you to respond.
Right. Well, in fact, I can only speak for myself, but it isn't difficult for me to respond. Oddly enough, from the beginning of the time I came in here, about 3 weeks ago, I've never had anything like that. There was a very clear understanding from the beginning that they didn't want us to talk about anything that might have military strategic significance, and there's never been any complaint about anything I've said otherwise, because I just made sure that I didn't say anything that might strike me as being militarily strategic. So, in fact, we've had a very, I would call it an easygoing relationship, because that was clear. In fact, some of the people who have been working for the Ministry of Information in their normal jobs are journalists, and so to a certain degree there was a professional common language among us.
All right, Bill Blakemore, thank you very much again. When we come back, I'll report on burning oil wells in Kuwait and how that forced us to abort a helicopter mission today into Kuwait City. In eastern Saudi Arabia at 3 o'clock this afternoon, a line of Kuwaiti fighter jets, each bearing what was until a few days ago a rallying cry and is now a promise fulfilled. The afternoon is balmy and bright. We're aboard a Royal Saudi Air Force helicopter bound for Kuwait City. We head north up the west coast of the Persian Gulf toward the Saudi-Kuwaiti border. While we are still more than 100 miles from the border, we see the first black slicks of oil coagulating along the coastline. Streaks at first, black lines in the turquoise water. Then thick fingers of oil pushed toward inlets by the tide. This is one continuing catastrophe of war unaffected by ceasefire announcements. The further north we fly, the wider and heavier the oil slicks become, until in places there is only a shining, iridescent blanket reflecting the afternoon sun. The day seems to change, the sky turning from blue to gray. A veil of smoke and oily soot is being pushed by a 20-knot headwind from north to south across the sun. The further north we fly, the darker it gets. Without radar, helicopter pilots are under orders not to fly when they have less than 2 to 3 miles visibility. Some 20 miles south of the Kuwaiti border, it's as though we'd flown into a fog bank. Visibility is down to 500 meters. The pilot makes an emergency landing at an Aramco installation. The sun, as you can see, is still high in the sky. It is late afternoon, but we are more than an hour and a half from sunset. Still, our helicopter mission into Kuwait City has been aborted because the visibility, because of smoke fires, oil fires that are blowing into Saudi Arabia from Kuwait, that visibility is so bad that the pilot feels it is unsafe to continue. There is a radio tower just about 500 meters behind me. You cannot see it because of the impenetrability of the smoke. The oil fires from burning wellheads inside Kuwait are so thoroughly screening the sun that the temperature has dropped a good 15 degrees. Drivers have turned on their headlights. It's beginning to look like night, although it's only 4:30 in the afternoon. By 5, more than half an hour before sunset, it is chilly along the Saudi-Kuwaiti border, and it is dark. When we come back, we'll be joined by the science advisor to King Hussein of Jordan, a man who first warned about what the environmental impact of this war could be. Before the war began, Abdullah Toukan, the science advisor to King Hussein of Jordan, warned us of the environmental damage that would flow out of the Gulf War. He joins us now live from the Jordanian capital of Amman. Dr. Toukan, is it as bad or worse than you thought it would be? And perhaps you can quantify it for us.
Certainly. First of all, as you know, Ted, this has just been going on for the fires for about 10 days now, maybe. And it's the beginning of it is showing me that it can be as horrifying as we anticipated. The cloud and soot of smoke that we are seeing is certainly quite thick, as you have just described to us. It can get larger and larger. And with the northwesterly winds prevailing in that region, it could certainly move it down to the southeast region over the Gulf states and Iran and maybe even to the Indian subcontinent. But again, I must emphasize that it's still the first 10 days. If the fires continue for about a month or two, that then we will really be talking about disaster, because everything is accumulative over here.
Now, we experienced ourselves today the temperature dropping. Indeed, it is a very chilly morning here in Riyadh, even though we're about 250 miles south from the closest of those oil fires, I would think. And I'm not sure if the audience can see it behind me, but the sky is sort of streaked with gray, and that too is evidence of some of the smoke that is wending its way down into Saudi Arabia now. What is going to happen beyond the cooling effect, and what will simply the impenetrability of that smoke mean in terms of rainfall for the region?
Yes, sir. Well, to start with, there's a lot of chemicals that are emitted with the burning. The most important parts of them is the sulfur dioxide, the nitrogen oxides. These, if they combine with any water droplets, will come down as acid rain. And acid rain will certainly ruin the vegetation and the soil of the region. So first of all, you have you've got the, sorry.
Forgive me for interrupting you. We're down to about our last 30 or 40 seconds. What is the impact of the falling temperatures going to have on this region?
Oh, okay, sir. Well, obviously, the falling temperatures there will also devastate the agricultural produce, the livestock, and might cause famine and reduce all that in the region. And if it goes down to the Indian subcontinent as well, and if it moves along, it can perturb the monsoon rains, the seasons, because of the variation of temperatures between the continents and the ocean. And there we have hundreds of millions of lives depending on it.
Dr. Toukan, I'm sure that we're going to be talking about this subject with you and with other specialists over the course of the next few months. I thank you very much for joining us this evening.